The new era of Rainbow is here under the leadership of Paul Bishop, with there still being an internal conflict inside of the GSAC, and the introduction of Nyx broadening how big the scope of the Keres Legion truly is. We have the Battle Pass lore for Year 11 Season 2, where we get even more insight from Bishop, so much info about Arassas, the state of Nighthaven, operatives who decided to come back and ones that have retired, and so much about who Nyx is, and some important stuff coming off of Sam and Snake's solo mission. So drop a like on this video if you enjoy, sub if you haven't already, and let's first start with the story tab of the Battle Pass. This follows after the cinematic where we see Bishop, Mute, and Dokkaebi take down Nyx. But based on what Bishop says, this may not be the last we see of her. Bishop says the following: taking down Nyx was just the trial run. The council wasn't all on board, but Rainbow will always be the only solution to a threat like the Keres Legion. They got 2 years to plot and advance their goals without opposition, and we can't put that cat back in the bag. More questions, more enemies. What we've learned is that the Keres Legion operates in factions. Deimos and Phobos' strategic strength killed the old Rainbow. Nyx's tech know-how nearly triggered an international digital disaster. And now, the biohazard case 0 found suggests that we'll face a chemical threat before long. If it comes to that, I'll need CBRN specialists, and a bigger roster to support them. Reselection and candidate reviews are underway, as fast as GSAC will allow. We're facing a new generation of terrorism, and we need to meet it in kind. So this has revealed so much about the broader universe. The big thing here is that the Keres Legion operates in factions. What this implies is that the Lair, Deimos, and Phobos, this was all only just one faction of the Keres Legion that we got to see. And although Deimos and Phobos would eventually be stopped, the fall of, I guess, their faction allowed these other factions to then operate unhindered after Rainbow's deactivation. This has allowed the Keres Legion to continue to advance to we're at this stage where we now have to have a new Rainbow under the leadership of Bishop. Now, I also want to talk about the chemical weapon he was talking about, the one that Zero found. He found that when he infiltrated Calypso Casino when he was trying to stop Eidolon. But I do wonder if this is linked to Nyx, because we know that Eidolon was selling access keys for his extremely powerful malware. And like what Bishop says here, Nyx's tech know-how almost triggered an international digital disaster, and we'll actually learn more in this Battle Pass that ArcNet were fighting this alongside the GSAC, and Dokkaebi and Solus were actually a part of this group, and Solus is still a part of this group. And I want to quickly play some voice lines that you can actually hear on Calypso Casino as well. And I'll be honest, I don't actually know who's talking. I originally thought it was Eidolon, but it sounds like this person is reporting to Eidolon, and they're currently doing the Vegas auction, which Sam and Snake infiltrated, and Eidolon would have been in Greenland at this time. So it doesn't seem to be Eidolon. It could potentially be Nyx, which would mean that, you know, Nyx and Eidolon are linked and a bunch of stuff there. I'm not saying it's Nyx. It could be a completely different character as well. But there's also a passport under the desk of a woman. Could this be Nyx? I'm not sure. Regardless of who this is, listen to these voice lines.
I'm assigning floor personnel to cover the breach point, flooding H&S channels to delay inspection until next week. I've moved the highest valued objects to the basement vault. Our digital assets will be slightly more complicated. If Kingfish still intends to outbid Overlord for item 17, it will require additional attention for transportation. Necessary personnel accommodations have been made. I'll come down as soon as I know this encrypt is working. Sir, we practically have the second largest standing army in the country on duty. 1 minute they were on their feet, the next half of them were flatlined, and the others still haven't woken up yet. Can't tell you how they did it, but we should consider ourselves lucky they only did what they did. The gravity of the situation is not lost on me, sir, but I promise you, there's nobody else in Vegas who could do what I'm offering. Whoever hit us last night either is a human or is operating on a level that we physically can't prepare for. I'll dig for as long as you'd like, but I promise you, all I'm going to find is shadows and ghosts. If you ask me, just pray that you've appeased them enough that you're no longer worth their time. None of this will get out. I know what it means to be threatened by the Cardinal. You hired me for a reason, so let me do my job. Security has been tripled for the auction tonight. I've called in favors from every side of the strip. Best you don't ask me how much it cost. As rough as our predicament is, anyone who mentions the Cardinal still gets a fair share of pull in this town. The last of the tournament guests have checked in, requesting a release of the hospitality funding.
But let's move back to the battle pass here, where the first thing I want to talk about is Nyx, and the ones focused on Nyx here. Firstly, we get the introduction of what seems to be a brand new character inside of Rainbow called Dr. Olivia Raj, who is the head of Intel. She says the following: Nyx was the main vector of digital terrorism, but her faction may still target online infrastructure. If ArcNet finds anything, call me. And related to this, Bishop says, I gotta give it to Nyx. There's no trace of her in any record. Even Raj will have a hard time figuring out where she fits in this puzzle. So we're starting to get a bit of an understanding of Nyx as a character and how big her side of the Keres Legion was doing when it comes to cyber terrorism. And of course, we've mentioned ArcNet. We saw that Dokkaebi was a part of ArcNet before being called back to Rainbow by Bishop, and Solace is still currently a part of ArcNet. We have one by Solace talking to Dokkaebi saying, I'll DM you if I need any help with ArcNet, Doke. If Bishop says you're more use in the field, I believe him. So really highlighting the importance of not only Dokkaebi, but Solace especially when it comes to facing off against this faction of the Keres Legion. And I really like with this new iteration of Rainbow, we're really fleshing out the different inner workings of this group. That is something which the previous iteration, you know, the one under Aurelia and Harry, there was a bit of lack of lore when it came to the broader side of Rainbow, so it feels like with this new era under Bishop, to me it feels like a bit of a soft reboot for the series, but not in a bad way, but it really feels like now they have the opportunity to properly flesh out these new characters, such as Dr. Raj, and potentially more characters which we will see. So I really love the whole thing with Nyx and ArcNet and everything here, and I like the broader implications for Rainbow as well, and I think we're definitely going to see a lot more of Nyx, and potentially even more factions of the Keres Legion as the lore progresses. But I now want to talk about one of the major players in the lore, Arassas. This is the PMC led by Denari, and we know that Denari leads this PMC very freely. It's just contracts, and if he wants you for a mission, he'll give you a contract. If you say no, that's perfectly fine. If you don't want to work with him again, that's perfectly fine. What we've been led to believe about Arassas and how Denari runs it is that he is just a very free agent. If you like this free lifestyle, if you want to do the jobs, you can. The offer's always there. Firstly, we have one by Denari himself talking to Fuze, saying, the Arassas handles contracts as written, GSAC. Client says no collateral. That's how we'll operate. Everything else is fair game. So this always does kind of feel like a bit of a meta joke about the whole Fuze and sometimes how you can team kill in gameplay thing. He's talking about collateral and stuff like that. But there's also an interesting flip side when we get one by Ying in this battle pass as well, who did go back to Rainbow, and it seems that she's trying to persuade Fuze to come back to Rainbow because, you know, what Denari says about client says no collateral, so that's how we operate, that's the job. Ying says, you may not see it, Fuze, but you're smarter than the guy who blows things up. Rainbow needs someone like you. However, it seems that Fuze has already made up his mind because he says, I like PMC work. No chatter, no drama. Well, except when Ace is there. And this is of course playing into the long tradition of the lore at the fact that everyone just dislikes Ace because he is damn annoying. We know that he is also a part of Arassas, and he says to Fuze, Fuze, what's with the silent treatment, dude? I thought we did great on that last contract. So yeah, it just seems like Fuze is just another name on the list of people who cannot be bothered with Ace. And it's unfortunate that Ace does such a good job, and we actually saw during the Detroit operation how good he was with his humanitarian work in saving civilians, because other than that, people can't stand him. Well, it actually seems like there's one person who likes Ace, and that is Pulse. He would get the offer to join Rainbow under this new era by Bishop. However, Pulse would reply by saying, I'm flattered, Bishop, but I'm not going without Ace. So it seems that Pulse is actually friends with Ace, and we saw their friendship when, all the way back in Operation Vector Glare, when the QCR incident was still a thing, we saw them hanging out at Nighthaven Labs. And it makes sense, we've seen so many people who just dislike Ace over the lore, it would make sense if at least one person likes him. So it seems like Pulse is happy to continue fighting by Ace's side, and there is some implications here that maybe one day, you know, maybe Bishop will say, okay, if you come back, I'll allow Ace to join as well. Maybe one day we will see ex-Nighthaven operatives who were never a part of Rainbow actually join this new era of Rainbow. maybe we could see Ace become a Rainbow operative one day. And this next one is going to segue us into a bit about Aruni, because she has a bundle in this battle pass, so there's quite a lot about her. But she got in contact with Denari because she's seemingly looking for Callie. And Denari says, haven't heard from Callie. Doubt anyone from Arassas has. But I won't stop you from asking around. So we know that both Callie and Wamai are MIA. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're up to. But it seems like there is something happening. And is it GSAC related? We simply don't know. But even Denari is saying like, you know, I don't know where she is. And you know, the rest of Arassas don't either. And considering most of Arassas is ex-Nighthaven, no one knows where Callie and, in turn, Wamai is either. Now, yes, this does move us over to Aruni, because we've had some updates on Aruni. We know that her, you know, condition was getting a little bit worse. We knew that her prosthetic was starting to be rejected from her body, and it seems like that actually happened. We have one with her talking to Legion, and that's also going to be our next point, is Legion and the whole CBRN unit. But what she says is, Legion, I heard you were going back. Lots of concerning news recently. Let me know if I can help. Armor or not, I'm still a private investigator. So we learn that she no longer has a prosthetic arm. Now, of course, in the skin and the battle pass, she does. It isn't affecting gameplay, but it seems like her body has rejected her prosthetics. Now, Osa is aware of this. She made her original prosthetics, and she says, I have prosthesis blueprints ready, Afa, but that's all they will be until you're back on board. As much as I hate it, my hands are tied. And what she means join isn't Nighthaven, because it seems like Nighthaven isn't even a thing anymore. It's been dismantled. She means Nighthaven Labs, which has now branched off from Nighthaven and is owned by the GSAC. And it seems that GSAC uses Nighthaven Labs to make, well, tech for Rainbow and other things. So technically, they're both assets of the GSAC now. So Nighthaven Labs is kind of Rainbow's QCR department, it seems. At least that's how I read it, unless they state otherwise. It may not be the case, but considering that the GSAC owns both of them now, they fund Nighthaven Labs, Osa runs Nighthaven Labs, and then they use that tech for Rainbow now. Osa even says, never thought I'd get a fair chance outside the private sector. GSAC isn't so bad after all. I hope Callie will understand. So yeah, still don't know where Callie is, but the GSAC bought Nighthaven and they seemingly prioritized the Nighthaven Labs aspect of it, which Osa is now the head of. And like I said, because it's an asset of the GSAC, the gadgets seemingly now go to Rainbow as well. And we also know that an operative who works at Nighthaven Labs alongside Osa is IQ. And she actually says something here, following what seems to be an offer from Bishop, just like what Pulse got. And she says, I declined. Unless Rainbow runs out of options, I'm happier working with you in Nighthaven Labs, Anya. So yeah, that is kind of like the remnants of Nighthaven is seemingly just what Osa built, and the rest of it does seem to be kind of gone or doing something else. Again, we don't really know what Callie and Wamai are doing. It's a very cloudy area with them. Right, I want to move over to the CBRN bit because we mentioned that Aruni was talking to Legion. And in the story tab, Bishop did mention the bioweapon in which Zero found. We see Zero pass this off to Bishop in the comic book. And we have Legion with what seems to be on a phone call with Bishop. And he says, of course, let me know if the lab finds any residue worth analyzing. I'll be on the plane in 12 hours. Now, Legion was actually part of Rainbow's CBRN unit and has experience with chemicals, so it does seem to be tied into Bishop's point that he makes in the story tab. And Lion also seemingly got the same call as well. He says, I hate to leave my trainees, but if you say a chemical threat is coming, of course I'll be there. See you soon, Bishop. So yeah, it seems that Lion was training soldiers at the GIGN, but now duty calls and a chemical threat is potentially coming, at least what Bishop sees happening. Right, let's talk about a bunch of the operators who are returning to Rainbow, and you may have seen some of this in the other video where we looked at the new org updates, but we get some insight here. The first one is by Sense talking to Raura saying, glad to hear that you're coming back, Raura. It'll be good to have you watching my 6 again. Now, this is a playful nod to the Operation Collision Point comic book where Blackbeard and Raura, when she was still a striker recruit, saved Sense during the assault on Hereford base. We learn that Raura has had another kid when she says, yeah, I had a third kid, so what? I'm ready to go. Now, who's this Bishop I'm hearing about? Furthermore, she says, it hurts to leave the Iwi again, but a safe world means a safe home. I'll do what it takes. Which means her tribe, her family. She's talking about her kids and her partner. And the final one by Raura, she says, "You serious, Six? The Keres Legion? Shit. I'd really hope that fight was over." Now, this is also especially interesting because Raura wasn't actually a full Rainbow operator for very long. She was still a recruit during the assault on Hereford base, and then she would get promoted, and then instantly Rainbow would go to Detroit to follow up on Dokkaebi. And that would take place over, you know, a week or so, and Rainbow would be deactivated. So, depending on how long the difference between Hereford's assault and them actually acting up on the Detroit operation, Raura wasn't a full operative for very long. Kavera answers the call to return to Rainbow, and it seems that she's actually going to be getting married to her girlfriend and soon-to-be wife, but she says, "I'm sorry, Amareko. The wedding will have to wait a few months. Rainbow calls, I answer." So, just like what Raura had to do, she had to put her personal life on the back burner because Rainbow takes priority. But now that she's back, we have one from Bishop talking to her saying, "Kavera, what's this I'm reading about Nook? She never debriefed?" Now, we know that Nook was going through a bit of an interesting period around the Detroit operation. She was going on secret meetings with Cav and Zero, which we never really knew why, and that she had a different authority on how to deal with the Keres Legion during the Detroit operation. Like, she was given a different clearance. So, when he says she never debriefed, I'm pretty sure what he means is when Rainbow was deactivated, she never debriefed. She was still out there doing her job in the shadows. And we know that Nook's current status is still unknown, so what the hell is going on with Nook? Dokkaebi speaks to Vigil saying, "They're not ignoring you, Vigil. You just have a reputation. Maybe you should try reaching out first, for once." Now, I assume she's talking about Rainbow here, and that, like, Vigil is kind of waiting for a call to come back after hearing about, you know, the new reactivation and stuff like that. Not really sure what reputation he has. That kind of something I'm not really sure we've heard of, unless I'm mistaken. But Dokkaebi is sort of saying, why don't you reach out? Why don't you try your luck? Maybe Bishop will want you if you prove yourself. It's kind of just interesting with Vigil and Dokkaebi's sort of arc and how they both started, that she's the one in Rainbow now and he isn't, and she's sort of kind of lending him that hand to be like, reach out, you know, you can do it. We have one by Castle, which is either during this mission we see in the cinematic or a completely unrelated one, but he says, "This is Team Leader Castle. Team 3 is on the way to the next pocket of Keres soldiers. Looks like stragglers so far." So whether it is that operation which we see in the cinematic or a completely different one, what we know here is that they are back in full swing going against the Keres Legion. And especially since we're continuing to learn the scope now that we learn that there's factions of them, and Deimos and Phobos were just one faction. Also, nice to see Team Leader Castle. He seems to be getting a bit of authority here. He deserves it. He's been around for a while. With Brava, who went from, you know, Rainbow, then deactivated to the GSAC, and then she would be put on leave for the GSAC for standing up for Flores and sort of challenging them. She would now be recruited by Bishop, and he says, "My Rainbow rewards those who speak hard truths, brother. It's good you came back. I'll have a talk with the GSAC." So it seems that how she acted during that period of time and her standing up against Lucas Liu and, you know, the GSAC itself, even being a dedicated officer, is why Bishop wants her back. He appreciates that part of her, and if the GSAC have issues with it, they have to take it up with him. We know that from his reintroduction into the lore that they called him up, so, you know, if they're calling him in, they gotta trust his judgment a bit, and he has that leverage then of like, well, you guys called me here, you're gonna have to do it my way. Ash says, "Rainbow under Bishop is the Rainbow I know the world needs. Let's make a difference." Now, it's very clear that this is the Rainbow that Ash wanted. She was critical of Harry. Of course, she liked him, they got along, but she was critical of him because he was never the one pulling the trigger. But now, Bishop is the one pulling the trigger. Not only is he ex-Rainbow and now back, but he's also back on field missions. We see him in that cinematic fully on the field. Now that Six is the one pulling the trigger, this is the Rainbow Ash wanted. We know that Maestro is now back in Rainbow after working with Arassas over the 2-year gap, and he says, "A new Rainbow, you say? Sure, I'll take that challenge. Denari will understand." So again, this kind of gives us that insight into how Denari runs Arassas, with Maestro saying like, yeah, I'll join Rainbow, and don't worry, Denari will understand that I'm leaving. Because, as we've seen time and time again, that's just how Denari operates. If you want to leave, you can. And also, Denari sort of understands the importance. Ram, another operative returning, says, "My sisters grew a lot in my absence. they will be fine without me. I'm ready to lead the charge with Rainbow again. So she's saying that when she left the Tarantula unit to join Rainbow, her fellow soldiers grew during her absence, and they'll be fine without her once again if she leaves to join Rainbow once more. Now, next I want to move over to the GSAC, because we have some GSAC in here. The first one is going to be from Counselor Smith, who is Aya Smith, someone we did see is pro-Rainbow. We saw that when they were getting deactivated. She was the one relaying this info, but she even said, this isn't the news I wanted either. And she's talking to Lucas Liu, and she says, automated military response is a fantasy, Liu. An international counter-terrorist solution was overdue. We do well to focus on that. So this is giving that sort of internal insight about the conflicts in the GSAC. You know, Lucas Liu has a different view on how the GSAC should, you know, fund stuff and, you know, protect the world, whereas Smith, of course, is more of a pro-Rainbow counselor. I do hope at some point as well we get to see what Lucas Liu looks like, because we've heard him a bunch over the past year or two now, and I think it'd be nice to place a, you know, name to a face. And I originally thought that Lucas Liu was Phobos a while back, but, you know, is he, you know, somewhat evil? I don't know. Now, not only do we know that Glaz is a part of the GSAC, he isn't a dedicated officer. He has a different role. Fuze says, repeat, Glaz? GSAC diplomatic envoy. And you said yes? And Glaz responds by saying, yes, Fuze. GSAC wanted someone who could balance edge and tact. And you may have noticed this in the last battle pass, and even with like Aruni in this battle pass, for example, because she's no longer an operative, it uses her full name rather than her operator name. And the same here is for Glaz. Instead of using his operator name, it says Diplomatic Envoy Glazkov, and Glazkov is his surname. And a diplomatic envoy is an official representative sent by a government, state, or international organization. In this case, the latter. So Glaz would be sent to other entities to conduct negotiations, manage foreign relations, and handle specific issues. A big role. It's a very nice detail I like throughout these passes of when they are no longer serving operatives, whether that's in their org or Rainbow itself, it uses their real name or new titles like this. Same goes for Nomad in this situation, where she is listed as Dedicated Officer Sana El Maktoub, who works for the GSAC now. She's talking to Frost, saying, no news yet, Frost, but rest assured, I made sure you were at the top of the pile. So this either means that Frost is, you know, adamant on rejoining Rainbow, and I guess as a dedicated officer, Nomad has, you know, the ability to do that, or should I say Sana? She's not Nomad anymore. She has the ability to, you know, put her name at the top of the list for consideration, or maybe Frost wants to become a GSAC member, and that's the list that she's putting her name on. I assume it is probably Rainbow though, and that Frost wants to be reintegrated. And finally, I want to focus on the operators who have declined to return or have retired and are doing other things. First is Capitao. We hear this come from his cousin Brava, and she says, no, Vincent's out. I think it would take an act of God to put him out in the field again. Next is Mina Sky, which is the real name of Thunderbird, and she said, things got bad at home whilst I was away, Doc. I can't leave them again. Not unless GSAC can guarantee their safety. So again, operatives we've seen no longer working with Rainbow or even just retired like Capitao. We're getting justifications as to why. I also want to point out the fact that she is talking to Doc, an operator who isn't currently listed in Rainbow either. So maybe he was talking to her about it. Maybe he got an offer and was considering it, and he was asking Thunderbird, you know, a fellow wolfguard operative. I don't know. Buck talks to Fenrir saying, hello, Emil. Heard R is starting again. Left you a new pair of binoculars. Stay safe. And Emil Svensson, who is Fenrir, says, hi Seb, 2 years waiting in a pine forest. If R asks about me, tell them where I am. I have a feeling I know where this is going. Now, I do find it interesting that he says, I have a feeling I know where this is going, because I don't know how much intel he knows. However, if Bishop feels like there is a chemical threat on the horizon, that's something which Deimos originally recruited Fenrir for. You know, that was the entire reason he wanted Fenrir, to create a chemical weapon to use against Rainbow. So when he says, I have a feeling I know where this is going, does make me wonder if Fenrir knows that this is going to go down a path which he was initially tricked to go down. Also, just the fact that Buck is talking to him as well. Buck was actually one of the operators who did Fenrir's initial interrogations, and he was one of the ones who saw the good in him and allowed him clearance to join. Thatcher talks to Dokkaebi, reinforcing the reason as to why he won't come back to Rainbow, saying, I can do more good raising up the next generation of soldiers than slowing you down on the field, Grace. Visit when you can. So yeah, we know that Thatcher is back at the SAS and he's just training the new generation of SAS soldiers. Maybe we'll see a new SAS soldier in the future trained by Thatcher, but it seems like he's no longer, going to operate in Rainbow. When he got his gadget upgrade, that was a last-minute update by Osa to assist in that Detroit operation, but he's done, at least for the foreseeable future. Kaid is in a similar position. He says, if you're looking for new blood, I can make some suggestions, but I'm needed here. My time with Rainbow is over. And by needed here, he means at his fortress, where he is training the next generation of soldiers, just like Thatcher, just in a different way. But he's saying, listen, if you need new recruits, I've got great soldiers here which I'm training. Hit me up, I can maybe give you some recommendations, Bishop, if you want new operatives. And maybe we will see a new operative in the future who was trained by Kaid at the fortress, just like how Oryx and Nomad were. We hear Valkyrie declining, saying, Hell Week is coming up. The trainees need me. Don't you have a dedicated intel team? Now, this is of course when we see Bishop trying to deal with Nyx, and we also saw Dr. Raj, and she's part of that intel team which Valkyrie is talking about. But again, just like many of these other operatives, she's training the Navy SEALs during Hell Week. She's training these soldiers the same way Kaid is, the same way that Thatcher is. These are experienced soldiers who have been through so much, especially in Rainbow. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a new recruit come from at least one of them, sort of passing the torch. We have Jordan Trace, aka Thermite, talking about how he's finished as well, and I think we've seen him throughout the lore, and he's probably one of the most deserving ones of retirement, and he says, I've lost enough, Afa. I'm not going back. Come see the farm. You deserve the rest as much as I do. Afa, of course, being Aruni, Thermite's dearest friend. Aruni even says something to Thermite, saying, no Nighthaven, no Osa, no Finca. The last 2 years have been hell, but I survived. I promised you I would, Jordan. I don't know, man. I think Aruni has been through a lot. I agree with Thermite. She should go visit the farm. The two should just hang out and rest. And the final one we have here is by Kapkan talking to Tachanka, saying, good to hear she's improving, Alex. When can we expect you back? She being Finca, because we know that Tachanka and Finca are now living together, and they were seeking out experimental work for her condition, which was getting worse. And we saw that in the Tenfold Pursuit comic book, but now we know that she is improving, and Kapkan's like, that's good to hear. And he's also just saying, can we see you back at any point in Rainbow? Because he is still listed as Spetsnaz, so he is still a Spetsnaz operative, but he's just not in Rainbow. And so, if I've not missed anything, that is the entire Battle Pass of Operation System Override. Fun fact, the Battle Pass itself is shaped like Dokkaebi, so there's your fun little final watch to the end fact. But yeah, a lot of time went into this video. Make sure you drop a like on it if you did enjoy, sub if you haven't already, and of course, let me know your thoughts on all the lore presented. Have a great rest of your day. I love you all. Stay safe. Peace.